There's 104 days of summer vacation, and school comes along just to end it. So the annual problem for our generation is finding a good way to spend it. Like maybe building a rocket or fighting a mummy or climbing up the Eiffel Tower. Discovering something that doesn't exist or giving a monkey a shower. Surfing tidal waves, creating nanobots or locating Frankenstein's brain.
It's over here!
Finding a dodo bird, painting a continent, or driving her sister insane.
Phineas!
As you can see, there's a whole lot of stuff to do before school starts this fall.
Come on, Barry!
So stick with us, cause Phineas and Ferb are gonna do it all. So stick with us, cause Phineas and Ferb are gonna do it all.
Mom! Phineas and Ferb are making a title sequence!
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today as we continue our 4-season series where we've been looking at some of the different rhythms that we see in the book of Ecclesiastes. And this week we'll be talking about summer, or rhythms of play and adventure. And just like in that clip we saw of the Phineas and Ferb theme song, there are lots of different ways that we can play and have fun, and Megan is going to be talking about some of those today, and how we can balance that well with work. But before we get started with the message, we do have a couple of quick announcements. So our first announcement is that the formal, our Time Travelers Ball, is going to be coming up on April 30th. And so tickets are available now to purchase in Church Center, and you can use the QR code on the screen to be able to go to the Church Center event for this formal and purchase your tickets. So we hope to see you there. It'll be a lot of fun. There'll be games and dancing and some food too. So we hope to see you there. Our next announcement for those of you interested in interning with DR, our internship applications are available, and again, there's a QR code that you can scan to get to the application. And this is just a really great way to serve and to really dive deeper into our church and seeing the different things that we do behind the scenes. And if you have questions or are interested but just want to learn more about interning, you're welcome to talk to any of our staff members, and we're happy to give you more information about what that would involve. And then our last announcement for now, or for today, is that we are going to be having our biannual Celebration Sunday in the next couple of weeks here. And this is our service where we like to recognize graduates. We'll be having a couple of baptisms, and then we'll also be having lunch after church. And so we really hope you can join us to celebrate the end of the semester and the beginning of our summer vacation. So we hope to see you there at that service at ENR2. And yeah, I'll go ahead and pray to get us started for today's service. Heavenly Father, thank you, God, so much for today and for this chance for us to gather and to hear what Megan has prepared for us this morning and talking about work and play and adventure. And so I just pray that we can be receptive of what she has to say, and that we can just really feel your presence here. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to summer, or at least this week's message on summer. But if we're being honest, Tucson's been in the 90s anyway, so we're basically there outside too. Doesn't matter how many weeks of spring there are left, technically. And summer really is this time for travel, potentially to a cooler destination, for play, for adventure, for fun. And especially if you think back to when we were kids and we had summer vacation, and you just got to spend all this time kind of doing whatever you wanted. It was awesome. I just remember that as being such a fun part of my childhood. And even as a kid, I was very scheduled, task-oriented. This will not shock you if you know me at all now. But I still dreamt of going on adventures. Me and my little brother Jeff would spend hours doing what we called making stories, which is where we would amass every stuffed animal, G.I. Joe figure, Barbie, and truck that we could find in our house, and we would act out some sort of narrative drama with them. We'd build these jungle and blanket canopy forts. There'd be some sort of conflict that they had to work through. And if we had access to stairs for any reason, there would be some mountain climbing and intense winter storms, just for good measure. If I needed to clean my room, I would motivate myself by pretending that my room was in fact my airship. And I needed to tidy the airship in order to go on my long trek to whatever exotic locale I was hoping for. And of course, that tidying my room included spending an inordinate amount of time organizing my collection of maps and Disney's Small World library books, which I would be using to plan that adventure, of course. And even if I wasn't actively imagining something myself, I loved reading fantasy stories about magic and adventure. So stuff like Harry Potter, The Hobbit, all of the Tamara Pierce fantasy novels, the Magic Treehouse series. The idea of just like going on like an epic quest and adventure, imagining this rich story through play was a huge part of my childhood. And I imagine it was for a lot of you too. But then we grew up, and for a lot of us, our idea of what play and what the summer looks like becomes very different. I highly doubt that child Megan would have been very interested in brunch or appreciated strolling through IKEA, even though adult Megan enjoys those activities very, very much. But it's also not uncommon for us to just not think play or fun is important at all as we come into adulthood. With school and work and just adulting in general, the idea of doing something purely for its own enjoyment can feel like a waste of time, and we certainly would not want our work ethic to be questioned. Maybe you just can't rest or relax long enough to just do something enjoyable. You find yourself itching to be productive and get something done. Or maybe you have the opposite problem. We also can overvalue fun and pleasure seeking. We live in this mentality of work hard, play hard, where we take jobs with all these intense hours and increasing responsibility, to show how driven and successful we are. But then we reward ourselves with fun at just as frenetic and crazy of a pace, and it ends up really being more about distracting ourselves than real rest or pleasure. Or perhaps we think that true enjoyment isn't any of this. It can only be found by being completely spontaneous and abdicating all possible responsibility. You gotta quit your normal job and lives and travel the world, move into a bus in the woods, avoid anything that smacks of adulthood or real responsibilities. We tell ourselves that life is about whatever makes us happy in that moment. But as much as our culture may think this and pursue this, people seem to be unhappy surprisingly often. And if we're being really honest, it's not like church culture is always helpful here either. Many of us, whether we grew up in the church specifically or not, have been formed in some way by a Protestant work ethic that tells us that the devil never takes a day off, so we shouldn't either. Many tropes of Christians in media, whether it be Angela from The Office or the anti-dance town in Footloose, are infamously against what most people would consider to be fun things. And this leads to a lot of Christians, either silently or not so silently, judging those that they think are having bad fun, and thinking that we're getting the short end of the stick because we don't get to do everything that all of our non-Christian friends do. And it's fair to ask, are we missing something here? We might start out loving play and adventure in our childhoods, but we can really struggle to bring that into our adulthoods in a healthy way. Summer is the season of play and adventure, but do those things even matter? Is there any spiritual significance to pursuing enjoyment in this life? And how would play and adventure fit into a rhythm of a life spent with God, if it does it all? And the teacher of Ecclesiastes has quite a few insights regarding seeking pleasure. It's actually a theme that comes up a lot across the book, not even just in one section. And why seek pleasure? Why pursue fun? These are important questions that need to be answered. And the teacher, ever the experiential learner, decides to try out every kind of pleasure he can think of to satisfy his craving and once and for all answer this question. We read in Ecclesiastes 2, "After much thought, I decided to cheer myself with wine, and while still seeking wisdom, I clutched at foolishness. In this way, I tried to experience the only happiness most people find during their brief life in this world. I also tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself and by planting beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs to collect the water to irrigate my many flourishing groves. I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born into my household. I also owned large herds and flocks, more than any of the kings who had lived in Jerusalem before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women, and had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire. So I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors." And this is a surprisingly modern approach in some ways to the issue of pleasure. You gotta try everything once, right? And in general, this sounds like it should be awesome for the teacher. He's got success, accolades, a beautiful home and gardens, lots of money, no limits on anything ever. I imagine that people flocked to the author of this passage. Entourage is only too happy to indulge in this pleasure seeking as well. So, how does the teacher feel about the results of his grand experiment with every kind of pleasure he can think of? But as I looked at everything I'd worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless, like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. From this passage, seeking pleasure is hevel, it's vapor, chasing the wind, meaningless. The teacher adopts the approach of seeking only his happiness, working hard and playing harder, and outwardly, it sounds great. He has everything he could ever want, and yet it does not satisfy. Nothing seems really worthwhile, no matter how great the pleasure. And even today, people pursue pleasure or fun or happiness, whatever word happens to fit the cultural moment at the time, as the main source of creating meaning in our lives. But it just doesn't satisfy us the way we think it will. And we may think that it's simply an issue of access. If we had more money, more technology, more time, more whatever, then we would just unlock this secret echelon of happiness, and that would sustain us forever. But as the author of Ecclesiastes, and like every celebrity who's burnt out by the time they're 30 can show us, it's not really a resource issue. It's that we've taken something transitory and tried to make it ultimate and eternal, our entire source of meaning. So, it begs the question, should we be pursuing fun or pleasure at all? What good is that if it seems like none of it is really worthwhile? And last week, in the message on spring, Tyler talked about the same issue around newness and possibilities. Ecclesiastes tells us that nothing is new under the sun, and that's true. But God makes things new, redeeming and restoring the world around us. Like Tyler told us, if there can be nothing new under the sun, we must look beyond the sun of the cosmos to the Son of God to witness something truly new. And with this in mind, we can look at seeking pleasure or fun very differently than how our world does. We have to look beyond ourselves and to God. On its own, pleasure is meaningless, vapor, hevel. But with God, there is good to be found in this life, joy and fun that bring us closer to God and to others. And the teacher of Ecclesiastes illustrates this idea in the context of rhythms. There is a season for everything. Neither work nor fun on their own are the end goal in and of themselves, but rather the meaning in them is found in the pattern and coming back to each one. Later, after the unsatisfying experiment with pleasure, the teacher shares this. Even so, I have noticed one thing, at least, that is good. It is good for people to eat, drink, and enjoy their work under the sun during the short life God has given them, and to accept their lot in life. And it is a good thing to receive wealth from God and the good health to enjoy it. To enjoy your work and accept your lot in life. This is indeed a gift from God. God keeps such people so busy enjoying life that they take no time to brood over the past. There is a rhythm here between work and rest, between purpose and play, that God gives to us as a gift. And if you're kind of internally rankling at those accept your lot in life lines, which for many of us who grew up in kind of an American cultural ethic of pushing up against any limit that stands in our way, you might be feeling that right now. Think of those instead from the perspective of contentment. We pursue contentment in all seasons, accepting the current circumstance, rather than trying to pursue more and more at the expense of ourselves and other people. But work itself is not bad, and neither is enjoying life. Both are meant to be gifts from God when pursued in the right context. And we know that our God is the one who gives good gifts, ones that truly satisfy. In James 1:17 we read, "Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. So knowing this, we need to look outside of this world's broken rhythms for pursuing pleasure. And instead, we can look toward the example of Jesus. Throughout the Gospels, we don't see Jesus admonishing people for having fun or just being a curmudgeon, but rather him pursuing a healthy rhythm of meaningful work and purposeful play. We'll see him teaching in a synagogue and then enjoying a fine meal. We see him healing the sick and disabled and then stepping away to rest and be alone. We see Jesus performing incredible miracles and then just relaxing with his disciples as they traveled. With Jesus, there isn't this mindset of working hard all week in his ministry so that he can spend the weekend doing whatever he wants, or of ignoring his calling so he can just focus on himself and what makes him happy right now. But he also doesn't downplay his need for rest and fun so that he can get, like teaching and healing and important work done. Instead, there's this rhythm in Jesus' life where purpose and play coexist in a healthy way without either one becoming ultimate. Jesus pursued both his work and the need for play and rest with great intentionality. And in fact, we know that he pursued enjoyment openly enough that the Pharisees called him a glutton and a drunkard, though that may have had a little bit more to do with their heart condition around fun than anything Jesus was doing. And in Jesus calling us into a life of deep relationship with him, we aren't just forsaking all fun and enjoyment forever. We are stepping into the source of life, a rhythm of work, rest, and play that truly satisfies because we are living life with the one who created all of it. In John 10, Jesus tells his followers, "The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life." Enjoyment is part of that rhythm, not something that we ignore or that we worship in order to find real meaning and satisfaction. And this idea that there is a place, an important place for fun and play and a rhythm of life with God can start to push up against the more negative scripts that we might have around seeking pleasure. And one way to think of these scripts is kind of like on a spectrum, ranging from seeing play and enjoyment as entirely unimportant and a waste of time, all the way to enjoyment and happiness being the most important thing we could possibly pursue. So if we start on kind of that play is not important side, one script that we may hold or at least run into is that play and fun are unproductive and a waste of time. We should be getting stuff done, hustling for more, not enjoying ourselves, unless that enjoyment helps us to schmooze or hustle even further, in which case, carry on. And if we do try to do something purely for fun, we might find ourselves feeling guilty and restless and wanting to turn that into something we can check off of a to-do list and show other people how worthy we are. But the thing is, making all of our activity about productivity or profit is soul-sucking. And it pushes us out of a healthy rhythm of work and play. It also doesn't actually make us more productive to forego all fun or restful things. At a certain number of working hours, our productivity actually plateaus, and adding even more, it will start to go down. It does not actually improve the quality of our work. And perhaps this is how American work culture operates, and we may think, well, I just have to do that to get ahead. But I think that many of us have seen over the last 2 years that the accepted pattern of our work culture is not healthy or sustainable. So why are we trying to prop something up that's just not working? But I want to take it a step further with pushing against this script. Not only is the narrative that enjoyment is unproductive and a waste of time unhelpful, it's actually a good thing that play is inherently not productive. Some of our most meaningful relational connections are forged in unstructured, unproductive time with others. Creativity is often born out of spaces of rest and fun that don't have a defined goal or purpose to them. I think one of the best examples of this is just kids in general. They learn through play. And that's not just some touchy-feely sentiment I'm trying to throw out there. That has very real neuroscience and developmental psychology to back it up. Because God wired us wired us as children to need play in order to learn and grow, and that carries over into our adult lives in a need for delight and fun there too. And with volunteering into our kids, I've had to really work on this idea myself. I'm a pretty task focused person by nature. And my temptation always with working with kids is to have every lesson be this Pinterest perfect production where all the kids sit still and they listen to my story and they answer all of my questions with super good juicy answers, and then we make a beautiful craft and they take it home with their parents and it's all great. And if you've ever worked with kids at all, or just, watched kids for any period of time, you know that that's nothing but a pipe dream. They are wiggly, they are loud, and right now, Catherine is in this phase where if she has scissors in her hand, she is cutting up everything she can see. So perfect crafts are just out the window. But rather than resenting this and trying to force the kids to mold to my Pinteresty will, God has used working with children to teach me how to meet kids in the space of play and imagination instead of perfectionism, and open up the activities and the lessons that we do to the process of creating and learning together, and choosing that over trying to have perfect products and perfect behavior. Spiritually, God uses real pleasure to point us back to God, back to our Creator. In the Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis says, the characteristic of pains and pleasures is that they are unmistakably real, and therefore, as far as they go, give the man who feels them a touchstone of reality. Rather than seeking enjoyment to impress others or to try and make ourselves appear more worthy or interesting or whatever, pursuing real enjoyment authentically in rhythm with work and rest gives us these touchstones of reality that point us back to God, the creator of that reality. There is a deep spiritual significance to play and fun, even if our world devalues anything that does not seem immediately and tangibly productive. And if we move a little further from that on our scale, the next script we see is that rest and play are just a reward for hard work. I work hard all week so that I can have my weekend all to myself and nobody can ask me to do anything. And if I get everything done on my to-do list, then I can rest or do something fun. Now, being able to treat ourselves in order to work towards our goals is not inherently bad. But we run into problems when this is the entire script we have around our rhythm of work and play. And I see this come up in particular when people talk about trying to have a Sabbath. I'll hear something I didn't get enough done, so I couldn't even do it this week. I didn't earn my rest. But that's not how it works. We don't work to earn rest, but rather we rest and delight and work in rhythm with one another. Sabbath and the rest and delight that God gives us in this life are a gift that we don't earn. And this script that play can only be a reward for work also hinders our ability to have real enjoyment. If we're working past our limits so much without any real rest or fun built in, then our energy and attention is too low for anything but passive pleasure that doesn't really fill us. Think about when you come home and you are just so zapped from your day. You have so little mental, physical, emotional energy that all you do is lay on your couch and scroll through your phone. And that's not real rest or delight. But the things that would really fill us up, like cooking a nice meal or talking with a friend or reading a book or whatever that might be for you, are just out of reach of our energy levels when we're already that far gone. True enjoyment often comes out of having sufficient energy and rest to start with. And so having a healthy rhythm of work, rest, and play is ultimately more satisfying than trying to use one to earn the other. Now, I want us to keep moving along on our scale a little closer to the play is the most important thing side. And this is the script that you've probably heard of before, which is kind of work hard, play hard, always strive for more. And this is really one of the most defining scripts around play and work for our culture now, especially with the young professionals crowd. You put in all the hours, you take on more responsibility to make yourself look as valuable as possible, and then outside of work, you go as hard as you possibly can. You're going every happy hour, you're doing brunch all the time, big vacations, new toys, whatever that looks like. It has to be big and you have to go harder and harder. And then the cycle starts over. You work hard, play hard, keep doing more and more and more. Now, I want to be really clear. What I am not saying here is that seeking excellence in your work or wanting to do fun things are bad. Not at all. I too love brunch and vacations, and I like doing well in my job. Those are not bad things in and of themselves. Like all of these scripts, the issue is often not the individual things, but the pattern of life it creates when this is our core script around enjoyment and play and work. Work hard, play hard might sound fine on the surface, but it often leads more to a pattern of burnout and distraction rather than purpose and flourishing in our lives. And it keeps pushing us further and further into ourselves. How can I be more successful? What will make me feel good? It's all about me and what pleases me in the moment. And that's just not a recipe for long-term joy and satisfaction in life. Instead, what both the teacher of Ecclesiastes and Jesus teach is the importance of contentment, learning to find joy in whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. Ecclesiastes 6:9 tells us, enjoy what you have rather than desiring what you don't have. Just dreaming about nice things is meaningless, like chasing the wind. We simply cannot find real meaning in constant striving for more. It will never, ever be enough. And we will just keep trying to add more and more things in our lives to try and fill that void of meaning that only God can fill in us. And this leads us to our last script, way over on the play is the most important thing side of our scale. Life is only about me being happy. Having fun and being happy are like the most important goals we can have, right? When everything else in the world is hard and complicated, we just gotta focus on us and what makes us happy to find meaning. Now, being happy is not a bad thing. Not trying to say that at all, please don't take that from us. But the wisdom of the teacher tells us that just being happy is not the end goal here. Joy is the fruit of a life lived well with God, not the center itself. Only choosing happiness as our meaning maker will not lead to long-term satisfaction. It might not even really lead to us being all that happy. And while many of us are pursuing happiness above all else, we're in a generation where many of us are surprisingly unhappy most of the time. In a recent article, author Arthur C. Brooks compared enjoyment versus pleasure in talking about pursuing happiness, where he defined enjoyment as something intentional that you create and pleasure as a passive thing that happens to you. And I want to be careful here and not say that enjoyment is clearly the good thing and pleasure is clearly the bad thing. These are just definitions for this kind of specific idea, so keep that in mind. So Brooks goes on to say that under these definitions, enjoyment is better than pleasure because it is more conscious and permanent. He says everyone gets pleasure from eating when they're hungry, but it takes some knowledge and cultivation to enjoy food. After you finish lunch, the pleasure is gone, and in fact, the idea of eating is no longer appealing because your physical need has been satisfied. And meanwhile, the memory of a meal enjoyed with friends transcends the immediate experience and can bring good feelings long after it is over. Intentionality and formation are what lead to real joy and satisfaction, not pursuing immediate gratification and just what feels good in the moment. For example, let's think about working out. We might not derive immediate happiness when we are exercising, but the practice of that regular discipline of exercise will lead to flourishing and greater enjoyment of life because we are healthier and more connected to our bodies. And on the flip side of that, the immediate dopamine happiness hit of laying on your couch playing phone games will give us passive pleasure, but certainly not long-term joy. And we know that. This is why the script of happiness above all else is just flawed. Only pursuing happiness does not form us in a way that leads to real joy and fruit of the Spirit. And in its own way, it actually keeps us from experiencing real joy. Because ultimately, all of these scripts across the scale put the focus on ourselves and a cycle of pleasure seeking or self-aggrandizement that do not lead to flourishing. Jesus tells us that he came not to fulfill all of our personal wishes or to make us into like ultra productive, joyless robots. Jesus came that we might have life, one that is free and light and satisfying. Again from John 10:10, the thief's purpose is to kill and steal and destroy. My purpose, Jesus' purpose, is to give them a rich and satisfying life. Summer and the pursuit of play and adventure and fun are good gifts from God. But how do we pursue these things in a healthy rhythm with God and push up against the negative scripts that we went through? And it would be really tempting here to try and look for like a prescriptive list of activities that check off all the right boxes for what is healthy fun. But that gets us into like weird band rock music and dancing territory pretty quickly. And it's really not all that helpful to try and have this standardized list in a community of people who are vibrantly different with different kinds of interests and needs. As one example, I was at a retreat in March in Oregon where we had an entire day just for Sabbath rest. And everyone there spent that day a little bit differently. Some people went on these like really adventurous hikes along the coast. Some people went and visited these cool historical sites. Some of us went to an aquarium. Some people just stayed at the retreat center and had a nice breakfast and took naps. And all of these were good and restful ways to spend the day. And it shows how each person has their own rhythms in seeking play and rest that can all be helpful. So rather than giving a list of specific activities here, I instead want to offer a couple of questions that we can use to reflect on our own rhythms of delight and kind of internally evaluate from there. First, we want to ask, how is our pursuit of play forming us? Day to day, week to week, year to year, how is the rhythm we have around play, rest, and work shaping us as people? And if we project out 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, what kind of people are we becoming with that rhythm? Are the scripts that we are holding and living out of around work and play, the habits that come out of those scripts, drawing us closer to God and to others, or is it pushing us away? For those who might find themselves ignoring play and rest in their rhythms entirely, how is that forming you? Do you like who you're becoming? And if you're pursuing pleasure from a place of addiction or distraction, how is that shaping you? How will it continue to shape you over time? Paul gives really excellent wisdom for this idea in 1 Corinthians. You say, I am allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. And even though I am allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything. We are given freedom to choose, but not everything will form us into people that we actually want to be. Carefully considering our pursuit of play from this perspective of formation helps us to kind of think about this idea long term rather than moment to moment trying to categorize every single activity we might engage in as good or bad. And with this question of formation, I want to be very clear that this is not some sneaky way of saying, well, actually, is everything that you're doing secretly productive or like spiritual in some way? Formation is not another way of asking, are all of your activities optimized? Are you maximizing every moment of your life? But in fact, unstructured, unproductive time can be a critical part of formation because it's crucial for creativity, for deepening relationships, and simply for recharging our souls. In asking how something is forming us, we are looking at the patterns we create with our behaviors and what fruit that is producing in us over time, not secretly enslaving ourselves to a mindset that every activity and every moment must be used in the most optimal and productive way. And second, once we've asked the question of formation, we want to think about, does your rhythm of play invite others in? Does it invite community and connection, or does it invite isolation? Now, before all the introverted people just mutiny at this, I'm not saying that every fun or restful thing you need to do has to involve other people. All of us, and some more than others, need quality alone time to recharge. Instead, what this question is asking is whether or not the overall rhythm is inviting other people to be a part of your life. For example, if I, an introverted person who needs significant amounts of time to myself each week, try to go every day to every event and get coffee with every friend every week and do all of the things with all of the people, I will slowly die inside. It will lead me to shutting down and eventually crashing with no emotional energy for myself or my husband, and over time, I would likely find myself pushing people away and avoiding all responsibilities out of resentment or fear of burnout. That is not a rhythm that invites others in, even if it involved a lot of people. That is a rhythm that is unsustainable and will eventually push everyone out of my life. Is your rhythm of play and rest one that energizes you and allows you to be present and available to others? Or is it one that encourages social burnout or isolation? Jesus welcomed others into his rhythms of rest and delight, and especially we see this around meals. He would travel with his disciples and talk with people all around Judea, and he enjoyed food and wine with everyone from religious elites to the social outcasts of his time. But he also took time to be alone and to be with God, or to just be with his core group of friends and disciples, taking time to rest and delight in those spaces as well. And this is a healthy rhythm of work, play, and rest, one that is inviting connection and community. Jesus even brings this delight into his parables of the kingdom of God and what that can look like, many of which involve feasts or celebrations of some kind. Our rhythms of work and play set us apart from a world that idolizes both of them. And this is a different kind of rhythm, one that we can invite others into and use to point back towards the one who created both purpose and play. And it really is a truly wonderful thing to witness and experience. For me, in this last trimester of pregnancy, I've often struggled to find the motivation or energy to do pretty much anything, let alone play. I'm tired, and it's hard to tie my shoe, and to just tie my shoes. Actually, I'm going to correct myself. It's not hard to tie my shoes. I'm just not tying shoes anymore. I've just given up on that task entirely. So the things I would normally find a lot of joy in can seem nigh impossible right now. And one of those things I normally find a lot of joy in is gardening. In this last month, I've managed to water my plants semi-regularly, and that is about it. And I've had this one paddle plant in our backyard that's grown super well, and it's actually overgrowing its pot right now, and that's causing it to start choking out the younger shoots that it's putting out. And I've known that I needed to do something about it, and I've been putting it off for a while now, but recently I just made the effort to get outside and deal with it. And initially I thought it was just going to be work, and I was going to find myself sweaty and tired and super annoyed about it. But like many enjoyable things that require some initial input of intentionality and energy from us, once I got started, I really enjoyed being with my plants because I enjoy gardening. This is a good and restful activity for me. Many of the plants we have in our backyard where this paddle plant is were planted about a year ago, and it was just such a delight to be outside with them and to see all the work we put in last year paying off now, seeing how they're growing new things and blooming, and just watching all of that kind of come to fruition over this past year. And this was in the evening, and so the weather had started to cool off, and there was some nice shade in the backyard and a breeze. And it made me think about Adam and Eve walking with God in the cool of the day in Genesis 3. And it's really easy to forget this verse because it comes right after Adam and Eve have sinned and they're hiding from God. But that imagery has always stuck with me. God walking through this beautiful garden God has made, enjoying the cool shade and refreshment there, just looking for God's beloved creation. And I imagine all the days before this one where God and Eve and Adam would walk together in the evening, chatting about their work or what the animals in the garden were doing or the new plants that they had seen blooming or giving off fruit. Just enjoying this unstructured, unproductive time in relationship together, enjoying this beautiful life that God had given. And that image of shalom, of a whole and restored relationship with God, the world, and with one another, is one that has room and an important place for play and delight in it. It is a gift from God, one for us to enjoy and for us to invite others into as well. Please pray with me. God, I thank you for the gift of play, of fun, of rest and delight. I thank you for the rhythms that you give to us in our lives, that you give us the space to be renewed and restored to rhythms that will actually give us life, God. I pray that you help us to examine the unhealthy rhythms that we've been holding on to around play and to recognize that it is not a bad thing, nor is it a thing to be worshipped, but a gift that you give to us that points us back to you. Every small moment of pleasure, every sweet moment with a friend, all of those, God, help us to remember you ultimately. And I thank you for those gifts. We love you, Lord, in your Son's name. Amen. And over these next few minutes, we're just going to have a short time of reflection. So a song will play, and this is just a space to kind of step back and actually think about what God might be teaching you right now through this message, through this morning, rather than just kind of try to rush into the next thing. So I encourage you to take this space to reflect. This is also a time to fill out our communication card. There'll be a QR code that you can go into, and that's a space for you to give us information, give us prayer requests, and as well as have some responses. If you are really just thinking how do I start to engage with something like this, that can give some guidance and a place to start. So I encourage you to check that out and just spend a few minutes just reflecting with God on the idea of what play and fun might look like in your life. Thank you.
set me free. Oh, you 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 set me free.
Growing up, my favorite summer vacations had to involve amusement parks, whether that meant like Disneyland or Cedar Point, which is the roller coaster capital of the world and a place that we would always make sure to visit when visiting my extended family in Cleveland. I love the thrills of roller coasters and rides so much that it is worth standing outside in the heat and waiting in hour-long lines for a 5-minute experience. I've spent many wonderful days with my family at an amusement park. Now, when we think of a season of adventure and play and pleasure, that's what we think of. We often think of big, grand, and exciting things like roller coasters for me, or perhaps epic hikes and rock climbing and camping under the stars, or perhaps relaxing on a cruise or on a beach. Pleasure definitely is not small and simple when we think about it. Yet, I now invite us to approach the communion table with pleasure in mind. It is a simple pleasure. It's a time to slow down, to rest and receive a gift from God. We don't often get too excited about communion, but I think we should. I recently read this passage from Walter Brueggemann, a theologian and scholar, that helps me to feel more excited about this simple practice of receiving bread and wine together. I have come to think that the moment of giving the bread of Eucharist, that's communion, is as a gift, is the quintessential center of the notion of Sabbath rest in Christian tradition. It is a gift we receive in gratitude. Imagine having a sacrament named thanks. We are on the receiving end without accomplishment, achievement, or qualification. It is a gift, and we are grateful. That moment of gift is a peaceable alternative that many who are weary and heavy laden, cumbered with a load of care, receive gladly. Let us think of communion as a gift to be enjoyed and savored, something we encounter at the center of Sabbath rest with Christ. We meet Christ at the table and we encounter the grace of God in this simple meal. This final gift that Jesus gives to his disciples before his arrest, trial, and death on the cross, before rising from the dead 3 days later. It reminds us of God's love, and it roots us in God's rhythms of grace. It may not be as exciting as a family trip to Disneyland, but it has been passed down from generation to generation through the family of God. I invite you to gather your elements and receive communion together. We turn to 1 Corinthians. For I pass on to you what I received from the Lord himself. On the night when he was betrayed, the Lord Jesus took some bread and gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke it to pieces and said, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he took the cup of wine after supper, saying, This cup is the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood. Do this in remembrance of me as often as you drink it. For every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, you are announcing the Lord's death until he comes again. Please pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this gift of communion, this invitation to be with you at the table of bread and wine. It is a simple pleasure, but a pleasure nonetheless. And I thank you, Lord, and I praise you for it, as this is a part of our regular rhythms of grace, Lord, where we encounter you. In your holy name I pray. Amen.
So each week at Damascus Road, we like to leave time for offering, just as a recognition that everything that we have is a gift from God, and offering is a chance for us to honor God with the financial gifts that He has given us. And so if you are new to Damascus Road or just visiting with us this morning, please feel no pressure to give. But if you are interested in giving, there will be a QR code, or you can also go to the Bible app and access our link for offering. And we also want to invite you to join us again next week. We'll be going into the third week of our 4 Seasons series, which is predictably autumn or fall, where Dave will be talking about rhythms of work and harvest. And so we hope you can come back to join us. I know it's hot outside, but it'll be nice and cool in ENR too. So we hope that you'll be there as we continue this series. And now we will go into a time of worship. So if you're already in the playlist, then you can just stay in the playlist, and it will go into our curated list of videos that you can worship along with at home. So yeah, now it's time for worship.